Hello and welcome to another video. This one I'm going to give you some exciting news. With patch 2.8 there has been lots of new triggers and effects that I have been able to release for the game. This page here shows you all of the new conditions and effects that I have added, which you can come and download with a link in the description. These triggers will only work on patch 2.8. In addition, there is also my Y search triggers updated as well for patch 2.8, which also takes account of these new commands. I'm going to go through some of these new triggers to show you what you can do with them. One set of triggers is the terrain and elevation manipulation. I've got 3 examples of using this. The first one here replaces one set of terrain for another on this scene here to turn it from a grassy scene into a snowy scene. So we've got Cliff Grief A, which is being replaced with Olympus B, Grass Dirt 25 being replaced with Snow A, and Grass Dirt 50 being replaced with Snow B. The passability change at the end means that the new terrain will take effect over the old terrain. If you turn this off, then the old terrain will still take a place. So for example, if you paint Cliff and have the passability turned off, it will still act like it was not Cliff, whereas turning it on would mean the units would not be able to move. The second example is I've just got a simple paint terrain between the rectangle defined by these 2 anubites. The third example is I've got an elevation change at the location of this arcus of a radius of 5 tiles, and I'm shifting the height upwards by 5. Relative means that the overall terrain shape will be preserved and the whole terrain would have been moved up by that amount. Turning it off means that the height gets set to the value entered. Let's give the scenario a run so you can see what the effects are. So here we go, the first case, I've got the snowy terrain with the Olympus B cliff. Now I had passability update turned on, so the archers will be able to walk down the cliff now. We've got the second example here where I painted a square defined by the anubites. And finally, I've got the terrain elevation update in the area by the arcus. As mentioned before, passability changes whether Cliff works. So if I go into the replace and change the passability to off, then none of the changes will have any effect on the overall terrain. This will now act like Cliff, and the arcus cannot walk over it. Another set of triggers allows you to manipulate what the major god is of a player. At the moment the player is set to be Zeus with I've just given them lots of resources to make building and construction fast and easy with a fast rate trigger, but this trigger is going to override the player to be a different god, and this can be any of the gods in the game. I've also got the option to include updating the UI, which means that the graphics will update to show the new god. I recommend having it on run immediately, as this will make sure it kicks in before the scenario starts, so it's as if you were that god the whole time. Let's give it a go to show you what I mean. So here we go. I've chosen the god Shenog, and everything looks as if I was always Shenog to begin with. So I've got the ability to build the peasants and immortals, and the age up dialogues reflect being Shenog. As I say, you can enter any of the civs. I also support entering random, semi-randomness, like putting Greek or Egyptian, and you can even put nature if you want to play as the god that Gaia often is. Another option you can do is use the player set Civ and Culture by name. The difference here is you actually specify the civilization and the culture separately. And you might think, what is the point of this? Well, one thing you can do is set a different civilization to the culture. And this can have some really bizarre and interesting effects. I'll show you this as an example. So here, we've now got Egyptian-style buildings, but we are worshipping Kronos. And as you can see, the UI is similar. The UI is showing Kronos, but the minimap border is showing that we're Egyptian.
In which?
Regarding villages and building and training, well, I can build obelisks, as you can see. However, I can also time shift them because I'm Kronos.
In which?
In addition, if I go to the town centre, I can build citizens due to worshipping Kronos.
Green. EU refer.
And I can build oracles. However, I can also build priests at the town centre. So as you can see, there's an interesting mix-up of civilization and culture going on here. Here, the age up dialogue allows you to pick gods that are unlocked by Kronos, as opposed to Egyptian. So here I have got the Atlantean buildings from the citizens. But as pointed out, I can also build some culture-specific buildings, such as obelisks from priests, and even monuments from Egyptian. So this shows you some interesting things going on with that trigger. Another set of triggers allows us to provide further control over god powers. One of the main things that's caused problems in the past is that some god powers have a recharge time, and this recharge time cannot be changed. However, that is no longer the case. With these new set of triggers, that recharge time can be removed or manipulated. Let's show you some examples. So, as a first example, let's grant a god power, but without the recharge time it would normally have. I've created a trigger for this, which is god power no recharge. So here we can select the tremor god power, which normally has a recharge time, except now we'll find that it doesn't have it. So let's give 5 uses and I'll show you in action. As you can see, it acts like a normal god power now without any recharge time. Another effect you can do is to change what that recharge time is. Now, the triggers to change the recharge time are not quite perfect, in that it will only change the recharge time for the next cast. Once you've cast the next one, the recharge time will go back to normal. However, there's a very easy way to work around that, which I'm going to show you now. So let's first of all change the god power to be a normal grant, so we have the recharge time so you can see it. So that's again, let's grant 5 tremors. And now let's make a trigger. Let's call it reduce recharge time. What we're going to do is we're going to have a looping trigger that checks if the recharge time of that god power is greater than the amount we want it to be, and if so, we reduce it down to the amount we actually want. So let's use the god power name recharge time, and we want to check if the tremor has a, we're going to see if the tremor has a greater recharge time than 5 seconds, and if so, we're going to reduce it to 5 seconds so that it's a lot shorter. So we can insert a condition of tremor recharge being greater than 5 seconds, and for the effects we're going to set the God Power recharge time. So tremor and 1.5 seconds. And let's see it in action. So I can cast one tremor, and the hover shows that there's a cooldown. So I can only cast now. Unfortunately, the UI is not the greatest, but at least effectively it works. The final bizarre thing you can do regarding recharge times is you can actually make a God Power that didn't have a recharge time have one. Now, setting up this is a little bit strange, so I'm going to show you how it's done. First of all, let's just remove the old. Let's just rename the old one to call it add recharge time. Now this time we're going to change the flaming weapons God Power to have a recharge time. So here, the tremor God Power, the recharge time is currently checking if it's greater than 5,000. We've got a different problem. We want to check that if the recharge time is 0 and add 1. So let's find flaming weapons. And this time I'm going to say if there is no recharge time or negative, we want this to activate. And for that, we're going to change the flaming weapons recharge time to be 5 seconds instead of the normal time. The grant God Power needs to change a little bit. To act like a normal recharging God Power, what we want to do is to grant one normal use of the God Power plus the rest of them to be recharges. Now, one thing I haven't talked about yet is that God Power have two kinds of uses. We have what they call immediate uses, and we have the second type, which is recharges. Immediate uses means you can use it straight away. Recharge means you have to wait for the recharge to occur. So I'm going to grant a single flaming weapons, which will come out as an immediate charge, and then we're going to set the God Power to have several recharges, which will have to use the cooldown timer. So we can use the set God Power name recharge count. Let's just give it 4 uses of recharges, and again select flaming weapons. Let's give this a go. So we've got some flaming weapons. Let's cast one. As you can see, I can't cast another one until the recharge time has run out. This is particularly useful for something like flaming weapons because there is a problem with some scenarios where if you cast multiple flaming weapons at once, the attack stacks, and when the God Powers end, they don't reset properly. So this is one use where you might want to set the recharge time of flaming weapons to be high enough such that the player cannot stack them. One of the new triggers gives you more direct control over the lighting and clouds. We already had triggers to set the sun colour and the ambient colour, and there was a hacky Z trigger using hidden dialogues which allowed you to set the sun position and inclination. This sun trigger has now been made as a proper trigger without the hack in there, which has 2 fields, inclination and rotation. The inclination is the angle off vertical that the sun takes. The rotation gives you the angle which the sun shines in the world. Now, the range is from 0 to 90 or minus 90 depending on which direction you want, with 0 being directly overhead. Just a note that 0 directly doesn't actually work properly due to a bug in the game. So if you give it a small value instead, like 0.1, the game is much happier with that. So I'll just show you the lighting here. So the sun, as you can see, is now completely overhead and the shadows are directly under the object. One of the other changes that you can make now is you can mess with the cloud data. And there are 2 triggers to do that, which I'll show you. The first one allows you to set what texture is used for the cloud map. So I've defaulted to the one that's used right now in the editor. However, you can change it to whatever texture you like. I'm going to show you what it looks like with a terrain of water foam. Just to show you an example of some of the strange things you can do. Here we go. The clouds are now water foam spreading across the sky. Which looks a little bit strange, but I'm sure someone will have some interesting uses for it. Another one of the things you can do is you can mess with the size and speed of the cloud. So I've got a second trigger which is called Set Cloud Data. And here you can set the intensity. That gives you how strong the cloud should be. The scale X and Y, which gives you how much the texture should be scaled. I believe this is the inverse, so a larger value actually causes the scale to look smaller visually. The speed gives you how fast it travels, and the direction X and Z is a vector of which direction the cloud should travel. So as an example, let's try setting the intensity up. Let's try 5.5 with a scale of 1, 1. Actually, I'll play in the editor this time so it's quicker. Here we are. So you can see the clouds are a bit stronger. They're moving a bit slower now, and they're moving southwards. However, you can, as I mentioned, you can also change it. So let's try reducing the scale so that they're bigger. Here we are. Now have nice big clouds. Another exciting set of triggers allows you to mess with the units in the game and manipulate them in game. Here are some of the new effects. The first one, I've set up this temple here to do the to mutate. What this does is it simply changes the unit into another unit. This is not the same as unit change type, but more similar to the unit transform command, which swaps all of one unit type for another. The mutate type is a much lower level change and means that many properties of the old unit are preserved. The second example we've got is scaling. You can now change the scale of a unit in-game, which I'm going to do to this temple, and not only that, you can also change each axis independently of each other. The next example allows you to stretch a unit. This stretching effect is actually what you see a little bit when you cast the Implode God power. As the Implode is working, the units get pulled towards the Implode, and buildings will sort of stretch and lean towards it. That's what this effect is, and we're going to set it on this temple. The next trigger effect is allows you to set the heading. This is not the same as the unit heading trigger, which already exists. Although it functions exactly the same way, it has one important difference. This version actually works online. So here we're going to set the temple to 45-degree angle. Finally, we've got the ability to set the tilt of a unit. The tilt is how much it leans over. Currently I've got this set to set the heading to 0 and tilt 45 degrees. Let's give this scenario a run and we can see all the effects that happen. So here we go. The first example, we've got the temple is now changed into Anubite. Here we have horribly distorted the temple with the scaling command. This one we have stretched the temple If you look as I rotate around, it looks a little bit strange because it's skewed. Here, the temple has been rotated, and finally here, the temple has now been tilted in the direction. This set of triggers allows you to control the animations of a unit. These animations can be viewed normally in the editor by opening the animation view control and selecting a unit, and you can see the different types. So we've got attack, board, death, walk, flail, and so on. We now, with triggers, have the ability to override these animations during a game. So we can use the unit override animation by name trigger. We can set that on the battle board. Let's change it to walk. These types are identical to what was in the animation viewer. Variation. Some animations have a second variation on there. For example, a Titan has 2 attack animations which it picks at random. We're just going to use animation variant of 0. Loop just means it will play continuously. Release on death means the animation will stick on the unit until the unit dies. And then we've got an event which you can fire when the animation completes if you want. Extra, I don't know a huge amount about this, but some animations take some extra data. I don't know what this does, but I've provided it anyway for anyone who understands it more. But you can leave it alone at 0. Let's give this example a try so you can see what happens in the game. So here we go, the battle board is now set to walk. Now, things get more interesting with a second trigger called Set Unit Override Animation Path. What this does is it allows you to set any animation you like on the unit in the game. So I've got this house here. If I open the animation viewer, we can see in the animation path there's a whole load of animations. Let's try the first one, and as you can see it changes it to an Egyptian age 1 house. Now if I just change that back, here this is what we're going to do. I'll explain how the selector works, but let's just play test so you can see what happens. So here we go, the house has now changed to a different style. Now, the way it works, unfortunately, is a little bit complicated. Most units in the game that have animations have an animation file. Inside there is logic for selecting which animation should be used. These numbers with a comma after it represent the choices that are made based on different parameters. Now, this default trigger, which I've got set up here, is what comes by default and gives you a selection for a house. So the first value represents which culture we are. So here we want it to be Egyptian. The second gives you which age you're in, age 1 being value 0, age 2 being value 1, etc. The third one gives you a variation. So different units have different variations. So we're just picking the first variation. And the fourth parameter is going to give the state of construction, and the fifth parameter in some cases changes the version. This is the variation that we saw on the battle board when we look at the battle board in the animation viewer, where I said that some animations have multiple versions of the same. So let's just show you an example. If I change the first value from 0 to 1, this will change the culture. There we go. The Egyptian house is now a Greek house. Obviously this is going to get very complicated for different units, as there are completely different parameters to help you to select from for the animations. So as a result, I've created a tool or rather a scenario to help you figure it out. This scenario, which I will provide a link to download, is called the Animation Viewer. So if we play test this scenario, I can show you what's going on. So there are 3 sections here. The left hand side is used to control which unit we're looking at. The top represents the animation type what we're going to have to want, and the bottom here allows you to change those numbers, comma separated number values. In the objectives, I've listed every single unit and an ID in order to find that unit. If we go to Spotlight, I've got the animations listed in alphabetical with their associated number. And the reason for this is to select a unit, you first have to find the unit. So in our case, we're going to look at the house. So the number is 465. Well, we can click these units to build that number. Here we are. The animation type is currently set to ID 0, which is none. We want to change that to 2, which represents idle. That list is in the Spotlight. Finally, we can start playing with the animations. So we mentioned earlier that the first parameter meant changing the culture, which we can now do live here. And this will give you the overall value which is being used. As you can see, we can change the styles. The second parameter I claimed was the age. Let's give that a go. Here we go. So we can go up the ages. The third parameter was the variation. Okay, just a couple of variations. The fourth parameter I mentioned was construction state. And then the fifth one was variation, but that's not going to have any effect in this case. Each unit has a completely different set of parameters, but you can play with this with each unit to quickly find out what changes what. So let's take that and let's try figuring out what's going on with the Wonder unit. So here the Wonder is 372. Here we go. Let's have a see what some of the parameters do. So here we're flicking between the different cultures. This one is changing between the individual gods. And this one is changing the construction state of the Wonder. As mentioned, each unit has a different set of parameters that defines its overall look. And also, the length of the string required to build the entire animation is different. I believe for Wonders there's only 3 of them, plus the variation which is unused. If you put more values in of 0, it doesn't matter. So in this case I'm using 7 values for everything, but as you can see everything still works. As you saw, there was lots of exciting new effects to add to your game. I hope that you'll find these useful, and there's plenty of them which I haven't covered, but feel free to ask in the comments about them if you want more details. I hope this was useful, and keep a lookout for more future videos and tutorials. And see you all next time. Have a good day.